Hello Year 13 and welcome to this video lesson on energy. We've looked at the carbon cycle and how it all works, the physical side of it, so now we're going to introduce the human elements to it. And we're going to look at the production and consumption energy around the world, and also what are the key factors which can influence the variations that we'll see. And you can see these are some of the key words that we'll be introducing in this video. Before we start though, a quick recap of some of the key terms that we learned in inquiry question 1. So pause the video, you can either write these out or print from the screen and just join up the key terms to the definition. Pause now. So how did you do? You can see the lines faintly joining up the key term to the definition. Check through your answers and make sure you correct any that you got wrong. I know I've stressed this many times before, but it is important to recognize just how vital soil is to the carbon cycle, and that soil health can depend on many different factors. And while we often focus on the impact of burning fossil fuels as one of the key human impacts onto the carbon cycle, the impact that we have on soils through farming, through deforestation, through the destruction of ecosystems is also vitally important. If we looked after the soils and we looked after ecosystems, they could be an amazing way at helping to redress the balance and to reduce the impacts of the enhanced greenhouse effect and the climate crisis that we're experiencing. Another key thing to remember is the importance of peat and permafrost. Now these are huge carbon stores, and it is important that you understand what peat and permafrost are. Peat is often found in very wet areas, either in wetlands or in high moorlands in places like North Derbyshire in the Peat district. Kinder Scout is a huge peat bog. And permafrosts are area where it's very cold. And because there's very little breakdown in the carbon, because conditions are so harsh for the decomposers, they are high levels of concentration of carbon within the soil. But these are the areas most at risk due to human action and climate change. And because when we disturb them or we ruin them, can also lead to a large amount of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere. So it is important that you understand the value of peat and permafrost, and you may need to undertake wider reading on that. So moving on today's topic in earnest. We're moving on then to inquiry question 2, and we're looking for the consequences for people and the environment of our increasing demand for energy. We're going to be looking at consumption, how it can be measured, and how that forms into the energy mix, the different ways that we can categorize energy types and how different countries rely on different energy mixes. And we'll also, as we said at the start, look at the different factors which can influence the consumption and the production and energy mixes and the levels of energy security within different countries. So we're really looking at 6.4 A and B. First of all, have a look at this map. What does it show you? You've got two questions at the bottom. What I'd like you to do is just pause the video and make some notes. If you were asked to describe the patterns that you can see, what would you say? And remember the way that we look for the patterns. We look for anomalies. We look for giving named locations. And we could give continents or countries. And we could also give compass points as well to help us describe, so the evidence. And not forgetting that we also, when we describe, need to use the information in the key to provide some evidence there. So pause the video now. So what is the information that we've got down? Well, we can see that the northern hemisphere tends to have higher levels of annual consumption per person. Now that's a very important part to look at, because we know that China and India are perhaps two of the countries which would use the most energy in total. However, because they hold sort of over a quarter of the world's population between them, when you make that per person, then obviously that reduces the amount significantly and where they would fit onto this map. But what we can see then is that we do have North America is a key user of or consumer of energy, between 250 and 400 thermal units. We can see Australia is also a big one. Saudi Arabia is unsurprising. And then we have the United Arab Emirates, and the Middle Eastern countries are also high consumers, along with parts of Northern Europe and Russia. On the converse to that, Central Africa. Remember, Africa is a big place with many different countries, so we need to be more specific than just Africa. And it's not all countries. Some countries consume more than others. And remember, we're at A level, so we need to have that level of distinction in there. So, you've written your answer. Now, what do you think the key factors are which will influence the consumption? And which do you think are most important? So again, pause the video and write some of your ideas down now. Hopefully you've done enough in this geography A-level course to have got those answers almost immediately, because they're very similar to when we look at the responses to tectonics, when we're looking at superpowers, when we're looking at regeneration. Some of the factors that are key there are the same. One of the main ones is the availability of the energy. And so the countries will tend to rely on the resources they have. And also, if they have more energy sources, they're then likely to consume more because the cost is going to be less to them. There's also the cost of the energy production and how accessible it is, and how accessible is it to actually transform it into a usable source of energy. We also need to look at the levels of development within a country to see, is it economically viable and has it got the expertise to be able to use and create those types of energy. It could also be expectations and standards of living in countries. Climate can also have an impact in that those which have more extreme hot or cold then may require more heating and cooling energy. Those which have large spatial extent may need more fossil fuels for transport. And as we're seeing now, the environmental priorities are becoming more and more important with the likes of the Paris Agreement. So, make sure that you've got an understanding of these different factors which can influence the levels of consumption. But also think about which are the most important. It really does depend. Some of the factors will be more important than others depending on the country. If you're a wealthy country, then some of these factors wouldn't be as important as if you were a poor country. So, as with all assessment and evaluation in geography, there are numerous correct answers, and different factors can influence other factors to show their levels of importance. With this slide, what we're trying to achieve is get you to think about some of the questions we'll be trying to cover during inquiry question 2 and inquiry question 3, but also linking more synoptically to some of the other human actions, but also possibly linking to coasts with climate change and the water cycle as well, because this is now where we really start to see the whole of the A-level course merging together, and where you need to draw links between the different topics and the different units. So just have a read through and just have a think about, as we go through the course, how you might be able to answer these and how your answers might change as we do go through. So what is energy security? We've heard that term in the spec. What does it mean? Well, there are 4 main arms to it. You've got to make sure, obviously, that you've got a reliable and uninterrupted energy supply so that you're not having power cuts. So people know that when they turn on the plugs, or they're trying to get work, or they're trying to get fuel into their car, they've got that supply there. It's also got to have an energy mix dependent on domestic rather than imported sources of energy, as we're seeing with Brexit and as we're seeing with some of the trade deals that are being done. If countries fall out with each other, if you rely on them for your fuel, then you are in a difficult position. So it is important to have a domestic rather than imported source of energy. It also needs to be accessible and easily available. And it's also got to be affordable and competitively priced so everybody can afford it. So what I want you to do now is just have a think about, why is energy security a vital element for development of countries? So pause the video and just write down your ideas. Well, the reasons being transport. How are we going to get goods around? How are going to people move for work if we can't have access to transport? We need it for light, whether that's just for learning or just being in the house. And having safe lighting is very important. It might be for heating and cooling and being able to cope in harsher environments. Obviously, the electricity for appliances like the laptop or phone and computers that you're watching this on. It's also vital for communications, not just for people, but also for business. And it's also very important for the manufacturing of goods as well. So if you don't have energy security, then all of these factors are going to suffer, which is going to lead to lowering levels of development or a reduced speed of development in different countries. But it's also important to recognise that we can discuss energy security in terms of the long-term security, where we're looking into how we're going to be producing energy in the future over the next year, 5 years, 10 years to meet with current demands. But also the short term to make sure that we can have it on a day-to-day basis. For example, if we relied solely on wind energy, what do we do when there is no wind? And so we've got to have that balance of energy sources to make sure that things can cope. And we also need to have a range of primary and secondary energies, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. Now, obviously, we're starting to look at providing much more transport through the secondary energy, because we can use more sources for that rather than relying on the fossil fuels. But that's still going to take a long time to happen. So here is a quick question for you. Is the UK energy secure, or is it energy insecure? Have a think about all the factors we talked about in the last slide. What factors do you think might make our energy considered secure, and what are the factors that may make us insecure? Think about what you've read in the news. Think about what you've done in other elements of the course, because this is an issue which is key today as much as it has always been. And think about the different elements of energy. Are we energy secure in all of these areas or in just some of them? So again, pause the video and write your ideas down now. So what were your answers? We often like to think of the UK as a developed nation with energy secure and everything is hunky-dory. But you can see there are some major concerns here, because increasingly we rely on Russian gas. We have relied on North Sea gas, but those stocks are dwindling. And it may be even worse when we look at the fracturing of our relationships with European neighbours. It could be even worse when we look at the possible division of the United Kingdom Union, because much of it the oil and gas could be said to be owned by Scotland. So this is going to lead to much confusion and much difficulty in ensuring energy security. We do know that we have signed up to the Paris Agreement, and we are looking at ways of diversifying our energy, particularly looking at offshore wind farms. Now that can be quite reliable, and the new wind turbines are extremely efficient, providing lots of energy. But we'd also need lots of storage for this energy. And this could be a key area because we don't need all the energy it can produce at the time it's being produced. Could we rely on solar energy? Do we need other sources as well? And while it seems great that we're moving towards more electric vehicles, are we going to have enough electricity if everybody moves to electric cars? So there's still a lot of discussion around whether the UK is energy secure, or could we do a lot more? The final factor is that we always consider energy security by looking at, are we going to meet the needs of the consumers, and we look at increasing our production of energy. But the key to the answer must surely also rely on reducing the amount that we consume. And this is where a great deal has to be invested, because not only could this have big implications on improving energy security, but reducing consumption can also have a big impact of reducing the impacts on climate change and the climate crisis. Okay, so chance for a quick recap of everything we've done so far. Making a copy of this mind map with the key ideas around it. But can you extend it to show how some of these factors might influence production and consumption, maybe using different colours to show it? You can rewatch the video, but obviously need to look through some of the textbooks and some of the video links on Firefly as well to give you an idea, so you can get a full extent of those factors affecting energy security. So here I've put some of these ideas into a table that you could use the key at the bottom for to colour in and show and highlight the different areas and what they're relating to. Here we're talking about factors affecting the energy mix in UK and Norway. Now I know this isn't very clear, so I will be putting a handout for you onto Firefly that you can print out if necessary. So you can pause the video, read through them, and then work out which statement it would relate to. For example, deep water drilling technology enabled both Norway and the UK to develop North Sea oil and gas extraction. So what do you think that would relate to? Well, quite simply, that would be technology. So how would you categorize these different statements? Pause the video now. So here you have the answers in this table on this slide and the next slide. So you can just pause this and check and correct your answers. Another quick little challenge for you. Obviously, we need to really understand the finer differences between some of these key terms. Some of the key terms you'll be seeing and have seen are energy consumption, energy intensity, and energy mix. So as a quick tester, which one goes with which? Write your answers and pause the video now. Okay, so usually a measure, number one, of how effectively a country uses its energy would be energy intensity. Number two, usually expressed per capita, would be energy consumption. And the final one would be energy mix. And notice with energy mix, there are lots of different ways to categorize the different types of energy. So it's quite a good idea now to start having a look at how energy consumption by country does change. And you can see on the information that we have here a global view of it. And we can see the difference between renewable and non-renewable sources. Now, if you look on the Firefly pages for Unit 2 and energy consumption, you'll see that I've put links to a number of different websites where you can actually go into individual countries and look at how their energy mix and consumption has changed over time. And as you'll see from the specification, you do need to have a detailed understanding of France and USA and the comparisons between them. Now, as we know at A level, being able to understand the graphs and the charts and what they show us and being able to describe and explain and analyze them is very important. So there are three different graphs that you can see here. We can see the world energy consumption, and we can look at the mix that we have here. We can also have a look at the energy consumption and the economic development of different countries. So we could see how the GDP relates to the amount of power used. So this could be very good in terms of assessing what are the key factors. Is it level of development is key? And if so, then would we expect to see a positive correlation? But what about some of these outliers that we have, like USA and Canada, and maybe Japan is far more wealthy but using far less power than necessary? So what could be the other factors that influence it? And then we have the simple global energy mix here as well. So it might be worthwhile just pausing and having a look at these graphs in a little more detail. Now, there isn't a great deal of information on USA and France in the textbooks, despite them being compulsory case studies. But you can see what I've done is I've put together some of the information from the graphs to show you just how their energy consumption and their energy mix has changed and how it compares next to each other. This information is also on the Firefly site, along with the websites I mentioned earlier, which allows you to really dig deep into the energy mixes and consumptions of different countries. When you've had a look at those, you can then start to fill in this comparison table. This will also be on the Firefly page for you to print out. Now think about the physical availability, and you only need the basic information on here. But what is important is think about the value of political consideration. When many of these textbooks were written, it was before the Trump administration. And we knew that the environmental priorities and political consideration changed greatly. Now, it may well be that with the inauguration of President Biden, we've already started to see some changes, particularly in the environmental priorities, as he looks to re-enter the Paris Agreement. So it is important that you do keep involved and knowledgeable of current affairs. So there's your introduction for energy consumption and energy mix. There is further information on the Firefly pages, as I've said, and you will need to be working through your inquiry question task sheet questions to make sure you've got a full understanding. You know where I am if you need help. I am there on email, and good luck and see you soon. Bye.